Okay, good morning, everybody. 女士们、先生们，你们好. I'm very happy that I can be here today, and so I just arrived yesterday. So for me it's 1:30 in the morning, but I hope I will still keep you and me awake with what I have to say. So the presentation is called China Outbound Tourism Growth, Segmentation, Sophistication. So because I think these are three important aspects of what we will talk about today. So just very briefly, so my institute based in Germany and in China has been around for a couple of years, and I've been doing work with China for more than 3 decades, and of course it's very, very impressive to see how China has developed in these 30 years of reform and opening. And I'm very pleased to be here in Australia and also to be among some famous colleagues and of course from China, Professor Dai Bin, who will talk after me, and I'm sure he will give you a lot of numbers and facts. So I concentrated in my presentation not so much on the numbers, which you can easily find anywhere, but as was just said, on the background information. So 3 steps for the presentation. Growth, so what's the development, what's the current situation. Segmentation, what are the developments within the Chinese outbound tourists. And I can start by saying right away, as long as you will think about the Chinese outbound tourists, you won't get anywhere. You will have to understand that this market is already developed and there's already a segmentation in it. And sophistication, so how to deal and how to make money with and make happy the new Chinese tourist. And finally, what will happen in the next 5 years. So you see it's a lot of content, so I'll try to be quick to keep more or less in time. I'm starting with a quote from a very good book. Here we go. From Patrick Smith, which says, all the ripping down of the old and throwing up of the new across China today cannot be explained as a matter of economic necessity alone. It's too frantic to be considered so simple. And frantic is a word I think all of you who have been to China will understand what's meant by that. The Visible Chinese project is, among much else, a signifier of an almost compulsive psychological urge to self-reinvent, to make being Chinese mean something new. So I think when we talk about China outbound tourism, that's what we're talking about, the reinvention of China. So China is an old culture, but as a nation, it's just 100 years. And outbound tourism is an important part of this self-reinventation process, which is going along like following Deng Xiaoping's idea, crossing the river by feeling the stones in the water, so without a very clear plan, but rather going step by step. And one example, you can see that in January this year, there was a big statue for Confucius based in front of the National Museum of Chinese History, which was, of course, surprising in a way. And so I was there. I took this photo in April, in the middle of April, and at the end of April, it disappeared again. So there are obviously not everybody in China is in the same mind how to proceed, how to use the past for the reinvention of China. So starting to talk about business, starting to work the development and current situation of the Chinese outbound market. So traditionally, travel has been an important part of the education in China, but outbound travel is not something where there is a long-standing tradition. So the most famous traveler in China, Mr. Xu Xiake, you can see him here that's a stamp from 1987 when tourism started in China, is not Ibn Battuta for the Arab world or Marco Polo for the Western world. Travelers who went out for trading, for adventure, or for religious reasons. Xu Xiake has been writing about China, and you can see down here, the China First National Tourism Day was celebrated this year, and it's celebrated on May 19th, because that's the first entry of the first book of Xu Xiake when he started his travel diaries. So that's what was taken as a National Tourism Day. So, and of course, more recent in Maoist China, travel and leisure were bad words. So a socialist worker was only interested in working for the construction of the motherland 24 hours a day. So it is only at the end of the 80s when we see this starting in earnest. So you know this one, outbound tourism growing and growing, and the yellow part, Asia Pacific, getting more and more importance in that. So more interesting for us looking at the China figures, we see that China has made it up to number 4 as a source market in terms of money. And of course, basically, in the end, it's not important how many people are traveling, it's important how much money they're spending. So, and for 2009, this number was 44 billion. For 2010, it's already 48 billion. And especially in 2009, when almost all the major source markets in the tourism industry went down, China was still having a growth to register. And I think this is when all over the world, everybody finally woke up to the fact that China outbound is an important part of the business. So there, in absolute figures, and we will see this again and again, in absolute figures, China is a very big player, soon to be the biggest. But if you go to the right-hand side and you see expenditure per capita, it's still just $33 per person per year spent in international tourism. And on the upper right side, you can see the total average for the world is 125. So when we talk about China outbound tourism, we talk obviously not about the majority of the Chinese society, we're just about those people who can afford to travel internationally. And we have to keep in mind, compared to the domestic tourism, that's just a very small number. We have more than 2 billion domestic trips in China last year. So probably you have seen this one before. So China developed from very small beginnings, from 10 million outbound travelers only 10 years ago to 57 million outbound trips last year, and is now the number 1 source market in Asia. And this is even if you take out those Chinese tourists who only travel to Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan, which is not really outbound tourism. Even if you take these 65% out, still it's bigger than Japan now. And the outbound expenditure since last year has been higher than the income from foreign tourists coming into China. So Chinese are now spending more for tourism outside of China than they're earning from tourism within China, which has not stopped the Chinese government from supporting outbound tourism, fortunately. And the share of China has been growing. So you can see here, whereas the world from 1999 to last year had an increase of about 73% of international tourists, China had an increase of 815%, and now has a global market share of more than 6%. So 1 out of 17 international travelers comes from mainland China. And you can see the little red part here, you can see that China has been growing its significance as a source market for the whole world. So there was a prediction by CNTA last year saying that already for 2015 there will be 100 million Chinese outbound travelers spending $100 billion outside mainland China. So maybe if this will be 2015 or 2018 or 2020, as UNWTO used to say, we will see in the future. But so the outbound source market number 1 at the moment, as a German, I'm proud to say, is still Germany. And you see these lovely ladies there presenting my home country. But even though I'm a Northern German, not a Bavarian actually, but well, they look nice. So this crown will be taken away from us, and of course it will go to China, and China will be within the decade the number 1 world market for tourism in the world. I think that's the reason why we're all here. So what's the current situation? When we look at these numbers, 57 million, of course we have to remember that about 2/3 of these trips end already in Hong Kong and Macau, and they're including people who just go there for an afternoon tea from Shenzhen to Hong Kong and back. And for this region here, it is interesting to know that, of course, the number is higher for the closer destinations. So if you look at the top 10 number of destinations for Chinese outbound tourists, you find that only the United States at number 7 is a non-Asian country. All the other countries, including Japan, South Korea, Thailand, and so on, are within Asia. So actually, more than 51 out of the 57 million trips have been going to Asia, in line the increase with the total market. But fortunately for us here, talking about Australia, when we look at Oceania, we see that there is more than 1 million tourists now for the first time traveling to this part of the world, and this has been an increase far exceeding the increase for China outbound tourism in general, with 66%. But still, to put this into perspective, down there you can see for the Expo last year in Shanghai, there were 69 million Chinese visitors and 4 million international visitors. And you can see people queuing up for the Expo. So only the Expo Shanghai had more Chinese tourist visitors than all outbound tourism to all places in the world. So for the majority of the Chinese people, still this is something away from their experience. So what are the positive influences? And here I'm quoting Professor Zhang Rui from China Academy of Social Sciences from an article in a book we are about to publish in English, the Green Book of China Tourism. Some positive influences for the development last year he identified. Outbound tourism has become a favorite part in consumption pattern. So it is for those people who are somebody in China, it has become normal and compulsive that you have to do international travel, otherwise you're not one of them. We had, of course, mega events. We mentioned the Expo, which also attracted people to travel outside because they got so much information and new ideas about the outside world. Very important, renminbi is now 20% buying 20% more than it bought 5 years ago. So foreign countries has become cheaper. We see a number of movies. Are You the One, the most famous one, which were shown in China and where there's some product placement and locations are shown, which then become important tourism destinations. So what happened, like with New Zealand, with the Lord of the Rings, happened to Hokkaido, Japan, with this movie, and with other places as well. We can also see that the top leaders of China have been very diligent, traveling around all over the world and signing a lot of agreements with a lot of countries, and all these agreements always include also exchange of personnel, exchange of students, support of tourism. And so the destinations, we spent an awful lot of money during the Expo 2010 to promote our countries also as a tourist destination. Of course, there are also some negative influences. There were a number of problems, especially between China and Japan, which negatively influenced the number of tourists going there. Saying that, we can see that normally these problems are rather short-term. So when Paris decided to give the honorary citizenship to the Dalai Lama, the number of Chinese tourists to France went down for a short time, but in the long term it came up to the old numbers again. There have been some accidents, most famously in Manila, where Hong Kong tourists were killed when the Philippine security forces did a not very successful attempt to free Hong Kong tourists who were taken hostage. So security is now a big issue in the Chinese press and the Chinese discussion, how to give more security to the growing number of outbound tourists all over the world.